Back to the losers, there's a lot more unnatural Teo and Sai dialogue. Again, there's something about these two characters that makes it so they can't just talk to each other like normal people, and it almost feels like once a character's core trait has been established once, every single piece of dialogue afterwards needs to exemplify that trait rather than introducing new ones or even just having a natural conversation. We need to re-establish once again that Teo really wants to take the fight to the firebenders while Sai is just kind of shifty and non-committal, and we use this re-establishing of traits to give exposition about how Teo's mom died, and oh hey look, there's the war balloon. Aang just wants to help with the bombing situation, and Teo's like, hey, I happen to have an idea for where the bombers are hiding, and I haven't reported this to the authorities. We have no idea how Teo knows where this is, or why, or what's going on. This is the direction the plot needs to move in, so he conveniently knows this information. Also, Saka and Katara are putzing around in the background. They may as well not even be in the scene. Look, there's Katara practicing waterbending. That's her character trait. That's the only thing she does. She's the waterbender. It's not like Aang is one. Also, Sai was just saying that he couldn't even get the balloon to work as if it were a lost cause, but he also says he needs to have it specifically ready to show the military by tomorrow. That's clunky, but alright. Sokka finally decides to speak, offering to help Sai with the balloon. So Sokka's ingenuity and inventiveness are traits we're keeping. That's pretty good, but I kinda wish they got established earlier. By the time Sokka met the Mechanist in the original show, he had already well established himself as the idea guy and thinker of the group. The first time we saw this trait was in Imprisoned, when he came up with the idea of fake earthbending to get Katara arrested, and then upscaled the idea with the coal in the prison itself. Then in Avatar Roku, we see him coming up with the idea to use fake firebending to open the temple doors, and we see plenty of smart thinking from him in Jet with the whole knife thing, and luring Pipsqueak and the Duke into the traps from earlier. And he breaks down the battle that took place before the events that took place in Bato of the Water Tribe, before completing his ice dodging trial through creative application of Aang and Katara's bending. That's a lot, considering how many episodes he was basically out of commission for in Season 1. And this would go on to become one of Sokka's defining character traits. So again, I'm happy to see it return, but Sokka hasn't really established himself much as a leader or thinker. Mostly because he was barely in the first episode at all, and was too busy being a horny retard in the second, but those are both the fault of the structure and writing. Then we cut to Xiao and Zuko. Xiao says that his sources say an airbender was spotted in Omashu, and apparently you can just get into the city if you know the right people. I won't repeat myself, this is stupid, and also dumb. Xiao offers to send some of his men into the city, but Zuko refuses, saying that he and Iroh will go instead. Okay, this is the kind of thing that I would expect Xiao to suggest if you were trying to get Zuko captured or killed, but this doesn't seem to be according to any of his plans. In fact, he seems a bit taken aback by the suggestion, like he's genuinely trying to be helpful, and he's like, hey, are you sure? Also, wait to bring Iroh into this, Zuko. Not to mention, an infiltration mission like this to capture Aang is extremely dangerous when Aang knows what both of you guys look like. And you, Zuko, in particular, have a very identifiable mark that would instantly give you away if any of his group were to spot you from any great distance. And interestingly to note is that the story is not progressing any differently than it would have if Xiao were not helping Zuko. Unless you count Xiao's sources knowing where Aang is, but I think that's just about as much of a contrivance as it would be if Zuko had just been tailing Aang all along and knew where he was going, which is what he would be doing anyway. But think about it, imagine Xiao wasn't here, but Zuko still knew Aang was in Omashu. He'd still infiltrate the city with Iroh. The only thing that would change is the scene would be half the length because we don't have to wait through Xiao offering a suggestion and Zuko shutting it down. Again. This is what I meant when I said that this pairing was boring as fuck and Xiao doesn't actually get to do anything. Anyway, Katara's practicing her water whip again, and she happens to see Sai doing a shady deal outside, out in the open, with a guy wearing the brightest red, shady-ass Fire Nation looking robes imaginable, who then firebends out in public. Jesus Christ. You know, the original show did this cool thing where the Mechanist's betrayal was revealed through a character moment for Aang, in a way that felt like a natural storytelling beat that could lead to just about anything. Aang is willing to open up to Teo and show him the parts of the temple that he thinks have been left unmolested by the March of Progress. This could lead to any number of things realistically, but this character moment ends up pushing the plot forward in an unexpected way. Or at least I didn't expect it when I was a kid. Now, the plot is being driven by coincidence. Katara is coincidentally practicing waterbending outside when she coincidentally sees Sai engage in this deal, even though this is a really shitty place to do this, and then Jet coincidentally is also there and pulls her aside so they can see what's going on and tail the spy. Now, Katara actually shows concern for Aang here, which is fucking shocking to me, but Jet lightly brushes her hand and all thoughts of that little bald goober leave her head. And off they go to chase down the spy as Aang goes to fly around with Teo. This is the kind of thing I was talking about in the last episode. Everyone is off doing their own different adventures with completely different characters, and so even though their bonding scenes have already basically been non-existent, this leaves even less time for our main cast of characters to get to know each other in any capacity. It's literally impossible at this point. Not to say they can't do this, obviously, but I think their relationship should be better established before the point where you can start ripping them apart from each other. Also, yeah, Aang and Teo literally just fly into the cave. That's all that happens in the scene. Then it's back to Katara and Jet confronting the spy in just the middle of the woods. So I guess they all managed to leave the city undetected through the one gate that's heavily guarded. Hey Jet, maybe you should have informed the guards or police or whatever that the dude in the bright red Fire Nation robes is a firebender. Whatever, here we are in the woods fighting this guy and his buddies. Again, the firebenders just shoot basic fireballs, but the choreography feels slightly better this time around. A lot of times the firebenders in the show will do this weird thing where they kind of generate the fireball in their hand and hold it for a second or two, and then fire it off. Whereas in the original show, firebending followed through with the body's movements as though it were an extension of them. Kind of like a fucking martial art or something. This still isn't great, but at least it's a fairly standard point and shoot as opposed to generate, hold, and throw. Katara stands around doing nothing in this fight for ages, and despite her whole business last episode with having a straight up PTSD flashback when confronted by a firebender trying to kill her, now she's good to go once she actually decides to start fighting. It's fine. Who cares anymore? It's not like shows like this are meant to be binged in one sitting or anything. Why would you expect people to remember details from half a fucking hour ago? Also, there's a really awkward pause in the fight for Jet to do his whistle, which doesn't even sound very loud when it did in the original, and apparently everyone was right there already, so what's the point? The whistle was originally a signal used to communicate between freedom fighters without giving anything away to the enemy. The point is, while you're hiding or staging an ambush, you can give information to your buddies while imitating bird calls, so that way no one's going to think you're actually terrorist tree goblins. Doing it in the middle of a fight is just doofy looking, especially when you have to drop your swords to do it. Just do a normal whistle if you want to signal them to attack. You don't need to use your hands to do that. Fucking I can do that. Okay, my lips are a little dry from recording, but you get the idea. Also, Smellerbee cuts this dude up a bunch with her knives, but there's no blood or injuries or anything. And Longshot pulls the classic Yuyan, Archer, and Mei special of pinning a dude by his clothes instead of actually shooting him. I genuinely can't tell what tone or age rating the show is going for here. People cursing and getting burned alive is totally fine, but someone getting shot with an arrow in the shoulder or something, or superficial slash wounds are just too much, I guess. I thought the point of the show was to present things that the original show couldn't because it was a kid's show. That's a genuinely valid reason for this show to exist, but never mind, I guess. We'll only do that in one scene right at the start, and then everything else is totally kid-friendly. Oh yeah, and Longshot shoots Fire Nation Robesman as he's doing the generate and throw thing again. You were almost competent for a moment there, show. Oh, and they butchered the Pipsqueak joke.
Thanks, Pipsqueak.
He's the Duke. I'm Pipsqueak.
The joke wasn't just that the really big guy is named Pipsqueak when there's a little dude who would fit that name way better. It was also the fact that Aang tells this huge threatening dude to his face that his stupid ass name is hilarious, and even he thinks it's funny. Now it's just bleh. Also, where the fuck is my boy Sneers? You guys remember Sneers, right? See, there he is. He was in one of the comics. He had a girlfriend, that was his whole thing. Oh, also, Pipsqueak just goes to casually execute these guys, off screen of course. Not necessarily a problem, just worth pointing out. I just hate how they imply they're going to kill these guys off screen, but don't bother to actually show anything when we've explicitly seen good guys killed in this very episode. I really just don't get it. Okay, so Sokka's working on the balloon model with Sai, who's impressed by Sokka's ingenuity and says that his father must be proud. And Sokka's like, yeah, no, not really. He doesn't understand me or pay attention to this kind of stuff. Okay. I have so much to say about Hakoda, but I'm saving that for a later episode when it's more relevant. All I'll say now is, I fucking hate the idea that Sokka has a rough relationship with his father when the big tragedy is that Hakoda is actually an awesome dad who had to leave his children behind after they'd already lost their mother. And the idea that Hakoda doesn't understand Sokka's ingenuity or inventiveness when that is clearly a trait Hakoda passed down to Sokka. Guys, Hakoda was an inventor too. Have we already forgotten the stinkin' sink? Why have we changed the dynamic from Sokka and Hakoda, the characters you're actually supposed to be adapting, into Hiccup and Stoic? Whatever, the point of the scene is that it seems like Sokka needs to make a choice between being a warrior and an inventor, when the biggest strength of his character was being able to combine those traits. That's what made him absolutely indispensable. He was a skilled combatant, a brilliant tactician, and had an inventive streak. You want a guy who actually makes the complex machinery, you've got the mechanist for that. But if you want someone who can get you out of a pinch MacGyver style, then Sokka's your man. I mean, we see something pretty similar in Kyoshi. There's no arbitrary distinction between being an engineer and a warrior, just as much as there is being a girl and a warrior. You can do both, but that's not really presented as an option. And we see basically nothing as a conclusion throughout the whole rest of the episode. Anyway, Aang and Teo talk for a little bit, and outside of a small explanation for why they're here, I guess this is a mine for special minerals that create the green flame seen in the explosions, which is a fine explanation, I just wish we got it earlier. It's mostly just repeating Teo's character traits over and over again. He really respects his dad, but wants to be a more active force in fighting the Fire Nation. It's really similar to the Suki stuff from last episode where we just repeat over and over again that she's isolated, and Sokka represents the idea of the outside world to her. It's boring. I understand that he's like this, and I can grasp why he's like this, but I want to see more. Especially if you're going to be pairing him with a character in this episode who has dramatically different values when it comes to violence and vengeance. Well, speaking of violence and vengeance, Jet takes Katara to the Freedom Fighters' hideout and, yeah, it looks like a playground. This is probably the most pathetic set in the entire show. I'm really not sure what happened here. Shooting on location in some woods sounds cheaper than building a set on paper, but it's also a massive pain in the ass. And the fuzziness of some of these background shots gives me the indication that there's some green screenery going on here. But come on, how hard would it be to build the damn treehouse set? The Freedom Fighters' treehouse hideout was not only visually awesome, but it served a purpose in keeping them hidden from the Fire Nation. This is a fucking playground in the middle of the woods. You will never be Tree City. It's made even more embarrassing by the swelling of the music like this is some awesome location. It's not. If only you had saved up some more budget for your sets. Oh well. Jet basically says that Omashu used to be pretty awesome, but the king grew complacent and senile and let corruption into his city. This is very strange characterization for Bumi, since the whole thing with his character is that he puts up an air of kooky goofballishness when he's actually not only a hyper-competent earthbender, but also kind of a mad genius who ends up making the best decisions possible in the long run. The whole thing with him surrendering Omashu was pretty smart in hindsight. He managed to keep the civilians and soldiers of his city alive when a siege would have been disastrous for them even if they did manage to win. Everyone but him managed to escape unharmed, and he was able to take back Omashu single-handedly by the time the eclipse rolled around. So I think for viewers of the original show, it's easy to interpret this as some sort of ploy on Bumi's part. Like maybe he's letting firebenders trickle into the city. Not so quickly that they can overwhelm him, but not so slowly that he can't get a bunch of them all at once when he springs whatever trap he's sure to have planned for them. But I'll just have to see what they do to Bumi. I'm sure I'll have nothing but nice things to say about him. Back to another very short scene with Aang and Teo. They find that whoever has been in this cave has been making blasting jelly, a material used multiple times in the original show. Though while in the original show it functioned as basically just TNT, now it has green fire. Because I guess the writers of the show, so obviously inspired by Game of Thrones given the quality of the writing, wanted to have a little nod to that show's wildfire. Anyway, Aang finds a burlap sack in the cave and immediately traces it back to Jet, the one actually responsible for the bombings. I kind of wish it was something more immediately identifiable than a fucking sack he made Katara wear, especially with how dark the cave is. I can imagine that a lot of people watching might not connect the dots here. Anyway, Jet tells Katara his backstory. It's obviously extremely wordy without actually adding anything of substance compared to the tight economical storytelling of the original, based off of naturally occurring character interactions. Now since we're cutting back, we just have to assume that one of those happened off screen. Katara explains that yeah, she lost her mom to the Fire Nation too, as we keep seeing in these goddamn flashbacks. They were really proud of the scene that I hate so much. She explains how her trauma is causing the mental block with her bending, and Jet's like, well, I don't know a damn thing about bending, but instead of thinking sad thoughts, why not think happy thoughts? And then your bending will be good. Also, apparently Katara's mom used to watch the sunrise every day. Every day! In the South Pole. Is it not, like, common knowledge how the sun works at poles? The original show knew about it, I'm just saying.
Giant light beams, flying bison, airbenders. I think I got midnight sun madness.
And yeah, thinking happy thoughts about her mom standing against this green screen lets her do the water whip. Cool. I love the complete and utter destruction of bending as a form of martial arts. It's so fucking fun to watch, bro. Not only do they establish that anyone with bending experience of any kind can basically train anyone to do any other kind of bending with a platitude, but now you don't even need to be a bender to do that. That's so fucking cool! Also, Katara and Jet's relationship seems a lot less explicitly romantic. Like, it was pretty clear that Katara was infatuated with Jet right from the beginning, and now she doesn't even have Saka there to get in between them. She's alone in the woods with this dashing, handsome, roguish boy, and we get like minor hints that maybe she kinda digs him, but honestly they could just as easily be fast friends. Oh wow, so you fuckers do know how to write that then.